Current economic predicament of most Nigerians who are, being hit hard by the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy, which is skyrocketed inflation, food commodities, and a variety of other issues around the economy at this hour. And of course, the federal government just last week announced the plans to release the sum of 180 billion naira palliative packages to state to cushion the impact and the effect of subsidy removal. Now, each state is expected to get the sum of 5 billion naira alongside 180 trucks of grains that will also be used as part of the palliative package for Nigerians most affected by the removal of fuel subsidy. So we're going to unpack it, as most states have already received those sums, and some already disbursing those palliatives to their citizens across the state. But of course, they vary from state to state. Even the approach itself varies from state to state. And we're going to take stock of how that is shaping the conversation today, with many Nigerians expressing their displeasure and dissatisfaction with regards to how things are being done and whether or not what is being given is good enough to make a difference in their lives. To help us unpack some of these developments, we're joined by the Director General, Borno State Emergency Management Agency, Dr. Barkindo Mohammed Saidu. And we also have with us in the studio Dr. Umar Ardo, who is an author, a policy strategist, and a public affairs commentator, to help us unpack and navigate all the issues around the palliatives in the country. Good morning to you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much for making time and for joining us this morning.
Thank you. You're welcome.
First and foremost, if we can start this way, Dr. Ardo, what is your take on the government's approach around ameliorating the pains, the sufferings of Nigerians occasioned by the removal of fuel subsidy back in May of this year?
Okay, thank you very much. As you said in your introductory statement, that the government has given out 180 billion, that is 5 billion naira to each state. Incidentally, FCT may be out of it because we have Nigerians in the FCT. So now in my state, for example, Adama, we have an average of 5 million people. Now, if you divide 5 billion naira, assuming that you give everybody in the state, something, then it means that only 1,000 naira will go per citizen. Now, 1,000 naira will not take you from Yola on Keke Napep to go to Jimeta and then buy anything and return. So giving money or whatever to our people is actually, to me, is not the best way. And in any case, palliative is a word associated with medicine. It is a form of medicine, it's a form of Medicare that relieves the symptoms without curing the disease. It therefore means that no matter the amount of palliative you give, if there is no medical treatment to the disease, the patient will continue deteriorating until the patient dies.
But I think the government's plan is for the people at the lowest level of the pyramid. It's not for everybody, as you assumed. It's for the poorest of the poor. So it's not going around to make a difference in everybody's life. I mean, surely there are people who can stay afloat without the palliatives.
Well, the palliative affects everybody. It affects everybody across board. And what is also the percentage of those that are above poverty level in Nigeria? If you look at those that are above poverty level in Nigeria, the percentage, to be most conservative, will not be more than 10%. About 90% of Nigerians are poor, really poor. So it affects them.
Okay. Dr. Barkindo, you have listened to the opening statement of Dr. Ardo, and sitting in my position, I was just wondering, because we've seen how much the Borno State government has been able to dole out in terms of palliative, and one is wondering, if you take a measure of what is given to one person and multiply it by what you need to do, how much is this 5 billion really what in terms of impact to drive home the real kind of suffering that people are enduring, and coupled with a state like yours that has been grappling with insecurity for a while, where people's means of livelihood has been displaced for an upward of over 5 years. What exactly are you able to do with 5 billion?
Yeah, thank you very much. Truth and facts remain the same, no matter from which angle it comes from. Exactly what Doctor said is the same thinking, is the same philosophy His Excellency Professor Babagana Umar Zulum had. When the palliative was announced, he said, okay, he's going to complement it. And also in Borno State, we are going to do it phase by phase, that is batch by batch. The first batch, he said that he's going to consider the most indigent among the population of Borno State, whether from rural area or whether from the urban area, the most indigent among them. And he targeted 300,000 households. And going by the standard definition of household and taking Borno State in Borno State context, an average household usually in Borno State and in northern part of the country, or in fact even in the whole of the country, average household is between 8 to 12 people. So the palliative that comes from the federal government is being complemented with, or augmented, I can say, with Borno State government. For now, the state government has already targeted this population, and every household is going to get not only grains, the grains coming from the federal government, the state government is also going to complement or augment with another quantity, and at the same time is going to consider some other commodities. Just as what Dr. Ardo said, palliative is not a permanent solution. The idea or the philosophy of His Excellency is to give them or to inject something in them, to bring them back to their senses, give them a sense of belongingness, to enable them to take up from the sudden
sort of like a shock absorber.
Yes, absorber, yes, definitely.
For the time being.
So it includes not only grains, it includes condiments, vegetable oils, including dress. That is.
When you talk about something to bring them back to life, if you like, one wonders. You bring them back to life, then they now face reality. They will return back to where they are. Have we seen non-financial palliatives, those that are sustainable, like a sustainable public transport system, that a subsidy that now impacts even more than those households? Because when they return to life, the life they will face would be encumbered by high cost of transportation, will be encumbered by inability to pay fees for their wards, will be encumbered by high cost of electricity, and these are not going away anytime soon. Is there a thinking for somebody like you who functions within the state structure about something that is more sustainable, that is more that with an impact that permeates just about every household? That way they return and there is a subsidized public transport system, there is a subsidized public health facility, there's a subsidized public school facility that would then enable them remove some of the burden that encumbers their little income.
Already before even the announcement of the palliatives by the federal government, in Borno State, the governor was able, in fact, even before his second tenure, was able to address issues like health facilities, educational sector, transportation. In fact, in the first tenure, he procured about 500 motor vehicles, the large buses and the taxi cab, distributed to those that are willing to be into transport sector, not giving everybody, but those in the transport sector. And he advised them, or even the state now is monitoring that this type or this category of vehicles usually take passengers lower than the actual amount, and the vehicles were given to the drivers, not to everybody, as I said earlier. And apart from that, let us still go back to what we mean by at least giving them a sense of belongingness and bringing them back to life. If we will continue giving them this kind of things, it's not feasible. We cannot sustain it. What we mean by bringing them back to life is at least, for instance, suddenly something occurred and you don't know how to organize yourself, you need an immediate response. So that immediate response, first of all, was targeted to the most indigent among the people, so that at least they can also realize their potentials after feeding their stomach.
Right.
So,
yeah. And Dr. Ardo, just circling back to you on that particular note, if you look at the scale of the problem and you look at the scale of the government's approach to a solution, would you say that it is adequate enough to at least make a difference in terms of stabilizing the situation? Because we're dealing with high-level inflation at this point, and it pretty much affects every subsector of the economy at this point. Do you think that the scale of the solution is good enough to mitigate the impact of subsidy removal?
Well, you see, I have a very different view with regards to palliatives. In fact, you shouldn't give palliatives, you shouldn't bring about palliatives on account of government policy. That is to say, the issue of palliative now is because of government policy of removing the subsidy. Now, what is subsidy removal? It means that the average market price for a liter, from digging it out from the ground, bringing it in its crude form.
So, sorry, Doctor, pardon the interruption, but we're going to have to go on a very quick break. We'll be back in just a moment to double down on the conversation around palliative disbursement across the country. Join us again. All right, welcome back to Daybreak, and thank you very much for sticking around. Let's get back to the conversation on the palliative disbursement. Dr. Ardo is, giving us his thoughts about the whole approach. So please finish your line of thought.
As I was saying, I don't have the same approach with regards to giving palliatives as it is being done, in the country. Actually, you don't create a policy of government that will create a situation in which you need to give palliatives. It's wrong. You give palliatives on natural disasters. If there is a tornado, if there is an earthquake, if there is a hurricane, if there is any natural disaster that comes in, you can give palliatives. But
isn't subsidy removal having the same effect?
If as a result of public policy, like this one on subsidy, what is the subsidy? It means that the price of a liter from digging it out, from the ground in its crude oil, in its crude form, taking it, transporting it, refining it, bringing it back, and then selling it at the pump price. That there is a higher price than that, and that the government doesn't want the people, or because of the situation that the people are, they cannot afford to pay this price. So government says, okay, we are going to pay the difference. You pay this much less, and we will, put in the difference. Now, to whom is the government paying the difference? The government is paying the difference to the marketers, those who are marketing it. Now, I am not a socialist in any way, but there are certain government policies that must be done in order to help the citizens. So, let government, either you maintain the subsidy and continue paying because the people are benefiting from it, or let the government be the marketers themselves. So, but where you create...
But you're surely not advocating that we go back to the subsidy regime. It costs us 400 billion and it's mired with corruption. There's very little transparency about the whole thing.
Please. The reason that the government brought about is what you are saying, either corruption or smuggling. Let's solve the problem of corruption. No matter what, if the problem of corruption is not solved, even with the subsidy, there's going to be a problem. Even in the disbursement of the palliatives, if corruption is there, it will not go anywhere. So the major issue is the corruption. So solve the issue of corruption, you have solved the issue of subsidy removal. We have an entire department of customs that is being given the responsibility of ensuring that things are not smuggled. Because of the failure of the customs department, Nigerians will have to suffer. So what is the essence of customs if everything is being smuggled out? So let us resolve the primary issues, and let us not be worried about the symptoms. Right now, we are worried about symptoms while we are chasing shadows, we leave the substance. So no matter what, let us solve the substance and our problem will be resolved.
When we talk about capitalist nations, I mean, the one nation that usually comes to mind is the United States, for instance, right? In its highest form, I think it is the most sophisticated capitalist state that we have in the world. And when COVID hit, to date, there are still people who are getting palliatives, so to say,
That is a natural disaster.
Yeah, but
it was not as a result of government policy.
But the reason behind it is to cushion the effect of the pandemic.
That is it. The reason behind it is to cushion the effect. Because it's a natural disaster, it's a natural happenstance that is not as a result of government policy.
Are economic.
Where government, it doesn't matter. Look at the source. Why are we having these consequences? It's as a result of government policy. So you should avoid such a policy. That is my point.
So just to make it clear, before we get the DG back into the conversation, you're not for subsidy removal, or you're for subsidy removal?
Of course I am not for subsidy removal.
Right.
I am for what makes the citizens comfortable.
Okay, so that ship has sailed. Clearly the Tinubu administration is not going to revisit it. How best do we approach making life better for Nigerians?
Okay, the issue of subsidy removal did not start with the Tinubu administration. It's been there since the period of Sheikh Shagari. During the Shagari regime, when the subsidy was removed, a little of it was removed, the government came up with palliative. I can't remember exactly what the government did, but during Babangida's period, the government came up with palliatives. The palliative that the government came up was in the form of a structural the structural adjustment program is the policy that brought about the removal of the fuel subsidy. Now, government therefore created what it called DFRE, where it will build feeder roads to go to the farms, to make the farmers have it easy to farm and then to bring their products into the market. They also brought in vehicles and so on and so forth. Now, during the period of I think it was Obasanjo, when Obasanjo removed it, he created NAPEP, whereby it's helped to resolve the issue of transportation. Now, Buhari removed it, but I can't remember anything that Buhari did other than coming up with the Ministry of Humanitarian, and then
there's the National Social Investment Program, which has NPower, which has NTeach, which has the conditional cash transfer, the trader money.
That was Jonathan. That was Jonathan's regime.
I mean Buhari doubled down on NPower.
That was Jonathan. I can't remember what exactly
I don't
the Buhari
think NPower
regime
was Jonathan.
It was Jonathan. Yeah.
All right. So, Dr. Barkindo, listening to Dr. Ardo talk, I was just imagining in my head, we are a nation of 36 states, right? And whatever would have accrued as savings from the subsidy removals meant that states would now be getting more money than they used to get. Matter of fact, in the last 48 hours, they shared some amount less than 1 trillion, a fraction less than $1 trillion naira as the monthly FAC allocation. It meant, or rather means the states are getting far much more than they did since the global oil market went down. What I'm driving at is, do we need to have a uniform, federally structured interventions at the state level? Dr. Ardo has said something that in my mind, I think even the states can take off. If a state feels that it wants to intervene in the area of transport and keep transport at a certain rate, it can as well track down every truck of fuel that comes into the state and say, rather than sell for 620 naira, as the case will be in Borno, which is one of the farthest point from the betting site in Lagos, we can subsidize up to 100 naira and have it rather sell at 500 naira so that we can make life a bit easier, and that way it can impact on everybody. Are these not possibilities? Do we all have to take the same approach, or wait for a federally guided approach on what we can do to make life better now that we are getting more from subsidy removal? At any rate, most of the governors also supported the idea of the removal of subsidy because they felt that it was taking so much away from the subnationals.
Personally, from my understanding, I can say allowing subsidy to remain is just like a vicious cycle. Just as Dr. Ardo said, the subsidy issue, or the best way to approach in solving the issues of subsidy started during Shagari regime, of which is about almost more than 40 years ago. And up till now, in 40 years, we could not be able to achieve the best way of solving the issues of subsidy. If one country has madness for 40 years, how many years can he act the madness? So all this while, the government is trying to find out the best way of solving the issue of subsidy. And we realize that the fundamental issue under the subsidy is corruption, lack of transparency. If now government will say, okay, in every state, let the trucks be taken, and it's exactly what they have been doing. The trucks will be loaded with fuel. They will complement the money, and probably the fuel will not reach the destination that it's supposed to go. It will go somewhere else, and they will still collect the subsidy. So we need to start from a point. We will not always continuously remaining under a situation that only few individuals enjoy.
Yeah, that makes me ask the question. We are aware on this table that the state governments openly canvass for the removal of subsidy, and now they have it, and they have those extra money. Just as Dr. Ardo has said, isn't there something we can do? Because beside what Dr. Ardo is saying, there is the economics of subsidy, which a lot of states do not agree with. A state, for instance, like Yobe, with less population of cars, less population of people, maybe more population of tricycles or motorcycles and vehicles, it is charged a certain amount to maintain the subsidy regime, where and that amount goes to subsidize people who, for instance, live in Lagos with more cars, sometimes one household with 3 or 4 cars, that buy more fuel, that use these things more than the citizens of Yobe. So in a way, why Yobe is charged to pay that 6 trillion naira that we incur, there are people who do not enjoy proportionately, you know, the benefits of those subsidies. So my question really is, as a state government, if we have to do what Dr. Ardo is saying, what stops a state from saying, we get 20 trucks of petrol per day, and on that 20 trucks, which, with one truck being around 33 or 45,000 kilometers, we will pay XYZ amount to enable the what do you call them, the pump stations sell at a price that makes it easy for residents in the place to procure these things, and in a way also reduces other costs that are impacted by high cost of transport. Is it outside what the state governments can do?
This is the beginning of the subsidy removal. And I'm sure even our discussion will give an input into the processes of refining it, retuning it, and finding a way. Honestly, this is the beginning. And remember, both you and Dr. Ardo were saying that the money for the subsidy should be used for that. When was the subsidy withdrawn? It was the subsidy was withdrawn just around
months ago.
Yes, just some months ago. So when something, okay, the money now is occurring. Number one. Number two, policy is subject is subject for reviewing. We need to we'll continuously identifying the gaps, identifying the loopholes, and reviewing it to find the best way that the beneficiaries will benefit. Just as I said earlier, that we need to start from a point. And probably this is the point. We have to take a drastic action to start from a point and find a way.
Talking about making the best of the situation right now, like I did say, there's no point in us crying over spilled milk. I don't think the Tinubu administration is trying to revisit the idea of subsidy removal or not. It is moving full steam ahead. The Buhari administration only made provisions before its the tenure came to an end for the month of June. And on the inauguration day, President Tinubu decided now is the time to take this red pill so that we can stop debating subsidy removal going into the future. This is the situation we found ourselves in right now. But in talking about the distribution of the 180 billion itself, a lot of people have called to question the idea behind it. Not all states are equal in terms of the economic power, in terms of their population. We know Lagos State does not share the same economic burden with a state like Zamfara, for instance. It does not also share the same security challenges as a state like Kaduna or Kano, for instance. Do you think there has been enough thought that has been put into the consideration around sharing 5 billion naira equally across the 36 states of the Federation? Because, for instance, you look at Kaduna with 73% of its population multidimensionally poor, and then you look at a state like Delta, for instance, with just 47% of that population multidimensionally poor. You then look at a state like Akwa Ibom with 71. You look at Zamfara with 78. You look at Adamawa with 73. You look at Taraba with close to 80% of its population. Do you think it makes sense to give all the states the same amount to tackle problems that are at different levels?
Well, what you have just said reminded me of the policy of the Babangida administration. When Babangida created 2 political parties, SDP and NRC, he decided that we are going to build the secretariat. So a certain figure, I don't know the figure, but a certain figure was now allocated, because the secretariat is the same design, it's the same size, everything. So a certain figure was brought out and given to all the states. Now, a state of river states, then Delta state, the coastal states, they said that the cost of just sand filling the area in order to build the secretariat is going to consume even more than what is being given. And for example, in my state, Adama, the money is enough, you clear the land and then you build the secretariat. So giving out equal figures to all the states, given the parameters that you have now enumerated, it really doesn't make much sense, in the sense that there are states that are less than 2-3 million or 3 million. There are states that are 17 million. So how are you going to do the distribution? So the government looked at equality without taking its attention to equity. So we need to give somebody 2 steps to climb. The short person should have at least 2 steps, while the tall person should have no step at all. But he will be seeing, the game at the pitch. So this is one of the issues. But fundamentally, we need to resolve the economic situation of the country. Palliatives only turn our people into beggars, into what do they call them? Alajuaidun. That's what palliative is. We bring thousands. I see his governor, that will bring thousands of people with bags of rice, with mudu of rice here, and they are all over, and then distributing it to them. It's so pitiful, because we have impoverished our people. Our economic policies have impoverished our people, and it is being done by the operators of the system. The Nigeria's problem is nothing other than the problem of operators. Those who operate public policies are the ones creating the problem. They operate the public policy in such a way and manner that it will benefit them and not benefit the national purse. Until this problem is resolved, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that we can do that will resolve the issue.
So essentially you're saying that there are things you can do for good reasons, but that could have negative consequences, and you think this the approach with the palliative disbursement is not necessarily going to solve anything in the long run?
By their fruits, they say, thou shalt know them. If you say you are doing something, a good policy, but the output is bad, then it is not a good policy. It is a bad policy, because a good policy ought to give out good results. Where the results are bad, that means the policy is itself fundamentally bad.
I think it's also, we're not limiting the conversation to the food items and to the 5 billion, because there is a lot more as far as the president's pronouncement is concerned. There's a lot of investment, funds that has been given to the SMEs that will help, boost their ability to operate.
We need to see a macroeconomic policy that will resolve these things. All these are micros that will function only if the macro policy is functional. And besides, as he is saying, just a second.
3 months. I mean, isn't this being overly critical about?
We need to see.
In 3 months?
Well, in 3 months, you will enunciate your policy. It is the implementation that takes
you're
time.
talking about macro, but I'm saying it's just been 3 months.
Maybe if I can support him. But from another perspective, he said we need to see the macro. You cannot build macro without micro. It is the components of the micro that will make it. And also, let us remember exactly what he said. Palliative is not a permanent solution. And that is why the word palliative was used. Palliative is just to give them, just to cushion and enable everybody, including the government, to design a policy that at least will substitute the issue of this subsidy. Yes, what he said is exactly the philosophy of His Excellency Professor Babagana Umar Zulu in Borno State. In fact, he's saying now that let Borno State citizens, or those that are living in Borno State, let them start thinking of being on themselves rather than expecting always to be getting something from either NGOs, from partners, from government, from whatever. Then also back to the issue that he's saying that we need equity. Yes, if I understand the policy of this palliative, sharing equal amount of money across all the states, don't forget, this money is not only federal government that is taking care of the palliative. The states government are also expected to bring out from what they are getting. And remember, the allocation of each state is different. For instance, if Lagos State will get 10 billion naira monthly, Yobe will be getting 3 or 4 billion naira monthly, and they are giving the same palliative. Yobe, the amount that Yobe will complement on it will not be the same as the amount Lagos State will complement.
I mean, to that point, and pardon the interruption, a lot of people say that your governor is sort of like stealing the headlines because he has made the most out of a bad situation from the insurgency that has hit Borno State. But Borno State has an unequal access to funds that most states don't have at this point, because there's a lot of intervention, there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of help that has been coming to Borno State for years now, and that gives you an extra boost to do a lot more with regards to the approach that you're doing with regards to the palliatives. Isn't that a good point also?
No, I don't agree with that.
You don't think
Actually,
Borno State has a lot more resources available because of the insurgency?
Does it mean that the president arbitrarily allocates certain amount of money?
I'm not talking about just government allocation.
Yes.
I'm also talking about certain intervention that helps the government do whatever it needs to do for the people.
And if you look at the devastation and the destruction that is being done,
I think we're making the same point. I'm just getting you to agree that you have more resources at your disposal compared to what other states have.
If I understand what
but is that a fact that you do have more resources?
It could be a fact, and also you have to include that the rate of devastation. You say that he's stealing the headlines of the
not necessarily stealing.
Okay.
I'm saying he's grabbing the
maybe
headlines.
He's grabbing or whatever, whatever. But he's drawing the attention of the whole world on the development that he's doing. Also, don't forget that during the devastation, we also drew the attention of the whole world on the impact of the destruction that is being done in the state. So it's just like maybe trying to balance what has happened. So there is nothing additional.
I get it. There's a good reason why you have to have that sort of help coming your way because of the devastation of the Boko Haram insurgency.
Yes.
But if we can double down on, say, the approach, for instance, away from just the handouts, what is the plan here? You're talking about the governor saying people need to find jobs, because we do know that one such sure way of getting out of poverty is for people to have jobs. And for people to have jobs and for the economy to thrive, especially in a state like Borno State, for instance, you have to address the security situation. I mean, significantly, we would say there's been a lot of improvement, but we're not there yet because we're still recording some attacks here and there. What is the government's plan to put people back on their feet so they don't have to keep giving them fish on a regular basis just so they can feed their families?
We have already set up the plan. The state government has launched the 25-year development plan last year, and also we have the 10-year strategic plan to achieve the 25 years development plan. And this plan was not designed by the Borno State government alone. We engage consultants, we engage partners, we engage the academias, we engage almost everybody. We did the baseline studies, identify the gaps, identify what we require to reach what we want to aspire. And based on that, we say, okay, if this and this and this are the things that we require, and this is our position now, we'll reach that destination in 25 years. So that is why the 25 years development plan has been launched. And now, any partner, any government, including the federal government, anything that the federal government want to assist the Borno State, will go and check it in the development plan and say, okay, this is our requirement, this is our need. Then we fill in the gap so that we can reach to that destination. That is why we are saying that his intention is, before his tenure ends, we would not like to see anybody receiving any assistance from anybody. Let us also develop the let us also mobilize the resources and be sending it to another countries, to another states.
All right, that will be very interesting
exactly,
to see.
and this is the wish.
All right, Dr. Ardo, I know you don't like the whole concept of palliative, but unfortunately, we will have to still stick around it. You will recall in not too long time ago, I'm talking about the COVID period, how the private sector mobilized resources to help cushion the effect of the suffering at a time. But politicians, being who they are, stocked up these items for whatever reasons only the heavens can tell. And that impacted on the security situation in the state. People became aware that these things were there and not being distributed. And in many cases, we had people breaking into government storages to help themselves. We are seeing a repeat of that incident now. The Punch newspaper actually reported yesterday that anxieties are growing in some states where they have received these grains and locked them up, whilst people are struggling to find a square meal. How best can we distribute what is available on the interim? Because you have to stay alive to see whatever those macro or micro policies would be. What should be the best approach, since people are beginning increasingly losing faith in the sincerity and approach of the subnational government, especially in the equity and fair distribution of this item?
Okay. I've seen, like in my state, the state governor set up a committee in which he brought in traditional rulers, religious leaders, civil society, labor union, and all key sectors of the society, to be involved in the distribution of the palliative. And if you can remember, my state is among the key states where people have been revolting on the issue of palliative. The one that happened, I think about 2 weeks ago, where about 7 or 8 people were killed, and 110 of them are right now in jail, are being charged for various crimes. So it tells you the desperate state of the situation. So if so long as our political office holders are not sincere in the execution of the policies enunciated for the good of the people, so long that there's going to be this distrust, and so long that there's going to be this, upheavals. Ted Gore, the founder of criminology, he said, when expectations are high and results are low, people tend to revolt. I expect a lot, and I got very little. I'm a historian, and the number one issue that had always triggered revolt in society has been the issue of taxation. When a government is taxing its people, then there's going to be no love lost between the government and the people. There are two forms of taxation. There is a direct taxation, and there is an indirect taxation. And from the policies of this administration, it is geared towards both. The subsidy removal is an indirect taxation. The rise of power is an indirect taxation. Now, and issue of VAT, issue of toll gates and so on, these are direct taxations. And if these multiply, and the people have no means of making money, that is to say, the means of living is high. I mean, expenses are high, and the means of income is low, then there's going to be a problem. So long as there is poverty in society, so long as there's going to be problem in that society.
Now that we identify what these realities are, my question really is, we assume that the state government are listening, and some of them are probably, like you said, completely lost on what would be the best approach to distribute. For some state governments, they've gone about saying they've added XYZ amount to civil servant, but civil servant is just a tiny proportion of the state of the population. So what kind of strategy, as a historian, as a social scientist, what is that magic wand? What exactly do we need to do to touch base with the people who truly need this palliative?
You see, there is very little you can do. When you have, like, say, 10,000 bags of rice or maize, and there are 2 million people out there that really need it. Now, how are you going to distribute it? You are only going to give, pittance, small. Maybe you one bag, you distribute the bag into, say, 10 or 20, and then you distribute them. 20 times 10,000. That gives you, is it 200,000 or so? Yet you have 2 million people out there. So, and if you give them, it is going to take care of them only for 48 hours or at most 72 hours. And then they will now want to eat again. You have to eat every day. Now, how are you going to take it? Are you going to solve it? Because you will not bring it again tomorrow. You will not. These palliatives, this distribution, I can guarantee you, they will take place probably once per quarter of a year. And people have to eat every day. So it will never solve the problem. The only way to solve the problem is to create the environment that will give the people the chance to make a living of their own.
Yeah, but
Doctor, the government is not creating this environment.
Isn't that, when it comes to creating an environment, economically speaking, we could be creating an enabling environment for the next 10, 20 years. It's a long-term thing. You don't create an environment overnight, isn't it? Where investors feel like, okay, it's safe for us to invest here, because Nigeria's insecurity situation is one of the biggest negatives in the equation, where even investors are packing up and saying, listen, first of all, investment like security, and we don't think Nigeria is secure. So creating an enabling environment sounds like a very ideal situation that would take you years to create. It's not something that you can guarantee in a week or in a month, isn't it?
No, it's not. But the issue, for example, of this insecurity is as a result of policy failure of government. Government policy fail. That is why we have insecurity. And insecurity is, you will breed it by hunger, by poverty, by illiteracy. So we have to resolve these issues. Yes, it takes time. And you cannot continue giving palliatives for the next 20 years until you are able to create the environment, the necessary environment. Can you? No, you can't.
Well, so maybe if I can come in here, actually, exactly what he said, but maybe the way he perceives it is almost like, say, different. Actually, giving palliatives is not a permanent activity. It could be only once in a quarter, just as you said. It could be, no, but just at least when you are hungry, the first thing that you require is to put something into your stomach. Once you get it, and if you have if you get the sense of belongingness, and if you are also a very good citizen, the next thing is for you to start thinking how to get it. But with empty stomach, you cannot do that. Your children are crying, everybody is crying in the house. You cannot even concentrate to do something. So to me, this palliative is the best approach for now.
What is the plan on your administration's part to sustainably handle this? Because we understand the Tinubu administration wants to do this for, I think, 2 quarters or thereabout. We don't know if they're going to keep rolling out the funds on a monthly basis or on what particular basis, but clearly the NEC has agreed with the approach going forward. But what on your government's side is being done to guarantee that there is some sort of sustainability plan, where on one hand you're trying to come up with a stopgap approach, but you're also not deviating from your permanent plan of restoring peace in Borno State, and also stimulating economic growth, so the people who have businesses can go back to their businesses, the people who need jobs can actually get the jobs to do so, because it's something that has to be done concurrently.
Even before the coming up of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration, Borno State has already designed her development plan, 25 years development plan. Is part of it. So this palliative just come and met our journey, our trip. There is this development plan, 25 years development plan, and at the same time, 10 years strategic to align, to put all these things, all these components in order to enable us achieve that 25 years development plan.
So you think the people in Borno State will agree with you that things are going according to plan as far as the poverty situation over there is concerned? Because
absolutely, yes, I think, but I'm sure, absolutely, because the plan was developed by...
Even the farmers who are still being displaced.
Exactly. If you can, okay, if you can see the way how even our people were comfortable to the extent that despite the fact that everybody is suffering, but if you read their faces, everybody is comfortable because they have hope on the government.
All right, talking about hope, we hope that whatever hope they have is not dashed, and in drawing the words of the founder of criminology, as enumerated here by Dr. Ardo, when expectations are high and the deliverables are low, then there are bound to be crises. We hope that we can continue to raise our deliverables to match the expectations, and that way we can make reasonable progress moving forward. We've been talking with the Director General of the Borno State Emergency Management Agency, Dr. Barkindo Mohammed. Saidu, it's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
This morning. We also had joining him and providing very deep insight and perspective on this morning's discussion, Dr. Umar Ardo, who is an author, a policy strategist, and a public affairs commentator. It's a pleasure to also have you join us this morning.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
That the next time we have you in the studio, we'll be concretely shifting away from palliatives to something more sustainable.